on the distant planet of Virelia. In a palace made of glowing crystal towers, there lived a princess no one dared to meet. Her name was Kalira, the unseen heiress, hidden away since childhood. She had powers in her mind, dangerous powers, that melted thoughts and shattered brains if anyone got too close. Many had tried to speak with her, ambassadors, kings, warriors. None returned the same. Some lost their minds. Some screamed and never stopped. Some simply vanished. Her people feared her more than they worshipped her. Even her father, the High Emperor, spoke to her only through holograms. Her throne room was sealed by invisible barriers, guarded by elite soldiers who never looked directly at her. The galaxy called her a curse wrapped in beauty, and even the bravest never stepped inside her chamber. But everything changed the day the humans arrived. It was the age of the Galactic Concord, a fragile alliance between dozens of species. Earth had finally earned its seat at the table. Tira, proud and ancient, accepted the human delegation out of duty, not respect. Still, Captain Elias Ward stood tall among the group. Soldier by training, a leader by instinct, Elias was not a man who bowed easily. His voice was firm, and his eyes sharp with quiet fire. He had fought battles across 5 systems, seen stars fall and friends perish, but nothing shook him. Not even the whispers about the princess of Virelia. Hey, when negotiations stalled, when every other envoy failed to win the Virelians trusted was Kalira, they asked to see. Only she had the authority to approve a pact, but none could reach her. The elders warned, anyone who tried would not survive. Elias heard them. He understood the risk. Still, he volunteered. I'll speak to her, he said. The room went silent. Some thought him mad. Others thought him arrogant. But Kalira heard of his offer. She allowed it. No one understood why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe fate. The next day, under the burning violet sky of Virelia, Elias stood before the entrance of the forbidden chamber. Guards in silver armor watched him like statues. The air felt charged, humming like distant thunder. As the doors opened, light poured through like liquid fire. Elias stepped in. The chamber was vast and alive, made of crystal and shadow. It pulsed with color that shifted as he moved. And at its center, sitting on a throne carved from star metal, was Kalira. She wore a crown that floated just above her head, her silver hair braided with threads of light. Her eyes were brighter than the twin suns outside, but cold, unreadable. For a long time, neither spoke. Elias took another step. No pain, no voices in his head, no madness. Her aura didn't crush him. Her mind didn't attack. Her expression shifted only slightly, but enough. Surprise. She rose slowly, her long robes gliding like mist. Her voice echoed inside his thoughts, gentle but firm. Elias answered with a steady voice. Now, I think you're lonely, not dangerous. Her brow arched. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not with pity, not with calm. Her power curled around his thoughts, tasting, testing, but found no fear, only curiosity. Why are you different? She asked. Elias didn't know. Maybe it was human stubbornness, maybe something else. But he took another step. Now they were only a few feet apart. The chamber lights dimmed, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Kalira's hand twitched. She had never touched anyone before. Couldn't, she whispered into his mind again. I could destroy you with a thought. Elias smiled slightly. But you haven't. Silence fell. She tilted her head. Her lips parted, as if to speak aloud. Then something unexpected happened. Elias stepped even closer to close by Virelian standards. Sand gently lifted her hand. The guards outside stirred. Alarms flashed in the distance. But inside, There was only stillness. Kalira didn't pull away. Her fingers trembled. Moments stretched long and thin. Elias leaned in, eyes searching hers. She did not stop him. And then, softly, he kissed her. A single kiss, brief, warm, real, and the chamber exploded. Not in flames, but in light. The crystal walls flared, the floor shimmered, and a pulse of psychic energy rippled across the entire city. Sirens screamed. Guards stormed the outer hall. The kiss ended. Kalira stood frozen, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Her power had not reacted violently, had bloomed like a flower after endless winter. Her thoughts were clear, calm. For the first time in her life, someone had touched her, and she had not broken. Elias waited, unsure of what would happen. Next, Kalira looked at him not with fear, not with anger, but with wonder. "What are you?" she asked quietly. Elias didn't answer. Outside, the doors were being forced open. Voices yelled, but neither of them moved. Something had changed. Not just in the air, not just in Kalira, but in the balance of the galaxy itself. 'Cause, for the first time, the untouchable princess had been touched, and she didn't want to let go. The silence after the kiss was louder than any storm. Kalira stood still, her mind buzzing with unfamiliar feelings. She had expected the human soldier to collapse, scream, or vanish like all the others, but Elias Ward remained standing, breathing calmly, his eyes steady and kind. The energy in the throne room shimmered like ripples in a pond after a stone had been thrown. Every crystal panel in the walls glowed with shifting light, reacting to the pulse of her emotions. Outside the chamber, warning bells echoed across the palace. Guards shouted orders, rushing through the mirrored corridors, unsure of what they would find. Inside, Kalira and Elias remained frozen in a moment that felt both dangerous and delicate. For the first time in her life, Kalira was not alone in her mind. She felt Elias's presence, not as an intruder, but as a calm river beside hers, flowing parallel without forcing its way in. She blinked slowly, searching his face for signs of pain or madness, but saw none. Elias simply waited. "Tita, speak." He didn't run. His stillness was more powerful than any words. Kalira tilted her head slightly, trying to understand what had just happened. Her people had warned her again, and again her gift was a curse. She could destroy thoughts, twist minds, leave memories in pieces. She had never been able to touch anyone without fear. Even her own mother had died after holding her once as a baby. But Elias was different. His mind had not shattered. It had bent and flexed, but it had not broken. Slowly, she spoke into his mind again, softer this time, almost hesitant. "You should be screaming. Why aren't you?" Elias's voice, in reply, was gentle. "Maybe I'm just too stubborn," he said, managing a small smile. The sound of boots grew louder outside the throne room. Kalira knew they would come in soon. Her guards were trained to protect her, but also to contain her if she lost control. She didn't want to fight, not now. With a thought, she raised her hand, and a glowing shield formed across the chamber doors, sealing them shut. Elias didn't flinch. He didn't even glance back. He only looked at her. She stepped away from her throne, her long robe whispering across the floor. Steps were cautious, unsure. This close, she could feel his thoughts, clearer memories of Earth, images of war and peace, laughter and loss. There was strength in him, but not the kind that boasted. It was the quiet kind, the type that held steady in storms. She reached out and touched his shoulder. Still nothing. No pain, no screams, just warmth. Her heart, long trained to stay quiet, beat faster. She pulled back, afraid. She'd gone too far, but Elias simply nodded. "Q, not a monster," he said, quietly. That word monster echoed through her. Q. She had been called that by her own people, even if not aloud. She had lived behind glass and energy walls, her name spoken with awe and fear, but never with kindness. And now, here was a human, a stranger from a young planet, saying the one thing no one else had dared. Before she could respond, a loud crack echoed through the chamber. The outer guards had brought in plasma cutters, slicing into the shield she had placed. The air sizzled with tension. Kalira looked at the doors, then at Elias. "They will not understand," she said. Elias stepped forward and placed himself between her and the door. "Teen, then I'll explain it to them." She blinked again. "You would protect me from your own people. From anyone who thinks you're something to be feared," he answered. Another crack in the shield, a glowing line spreading wider. The room trembled. Kalira took his hand, actually held it. The contact sent a soft pulse through the chamber. Not a blast, but something warm, something alive. Her psychic field, which had once overwhelmed all who came near, now curved around Elias like a second skin. They stood side by side as the shield finally gave way. The doors burst open and guards rushed in, weapons raised, ready for chaos, but they froze. What they saw was not an out-of-control princess and a broken human. They saw two figures standing, calmly, hand in hand, surrounded by glowing light that did not destroy its soothe. The lead guard faltered. Is the human alive?" Kalira answered before Elias could. "He is more than alive. He is untouched, and I am unchanged." Whispers filled the air. No one knew what to do. For generations, Kalira had been an untouchable being, a living weapon of the mind. And now, before their eyes, she stood with someone who had kissed her and survived. The news spread across the palace like wildfire. Visors, nobles, and elders gathered quickly, their faces pale, their voices uncertain. Some demanded that Elias be detained, fearing he had tricked the princess with forbidden technology. Others whispered a prophecy of an outsider who would one day calm the storm within the royal mind. Kalira dismissed them all. She brought Elias to her private chamber, a room untouched by any other living soul. There, she asked him questions about Earth, about his life, about the dreams that filled his mind. And he listened to hers too. The more they spoke, the clearer it became that their connection was not an accident. Kalira's power didn't vanish around him. It flowed better, steadier, like a river that had found its course. Late into the Varelian night, they sat in silence, a peaceful silence. Not the one she had always lived in, filled with fear and distance, but a shared, living quiet. For Kalira, the silence was shattering, 'cause it was no longer empty. It was full of meaning, of promise. And as the moons of Varelia rose high in the sky, lighting the glass towers in silver, she leaned her head gently on Elias's shoulder. For the first time, she didn't have to hide. And for the first time, she didn't feel alone. News of the kiss spread faster than light. In less than a day, whispers turned to shouts, and the palace buzzed like a hive full of frightened bees. No one knew what to believe. Some said the human had used forbidden tech to shield his mind. Others claimed Kalira had lost control of her power and damaged him beyond repair. But the truth was stranger than all the rumors. Captain Elias Ward had not only survived the princess's touching, had calmed her. The throne chamber's sensors had recorded everything, the energy spike, the psychic pulse, and then ... peace. The data made no sense. Varelian scientists studied the patterns, tracing the pulse back through the city's crystal towers. The energy had flowed, not as a weapon, but as a signal, a message, not just to the palace, but beyond it, across the planet, into orbit, through the void between stars. Unseen and silent, the ripple moved like a living thing, carried by the same psychic waves Kalira had always struggled to control. But now, instead of chaos, it carried harmony. It touched minds, and minds touched back brief flashes, impressions, dreams before the ripple faded into the dark. In the royal compound, Kalira stayed close to Elias, her expression calm but watchful. She felt lighter, as if a weight had finally shifted off her chest, but she also sensed what was coming. The ripple had not gone unnoticed. Across the galactic concord, powerful minds had felt it. Not just Varelians, not just humans, okay? Others ancient species who knew what such a pulse meant had turned their attention toward Varelia. Some were curious, some were afraid, and some were ready to act. Kalira knew the danger. She met with her father, the Emperor, behind closed doors. Ki was older now, tired from years of ruling a people, too afraid of their own gift. He stared at his daughter with a mix of awe and worry. "Started something we cannot contain," he said quietly. "It wasn't meant to be contained," Kalira replied. "It was meant to be shared." He looked at Elias, who stood beside her, still silent, always watching. The Emperor frowned. "They will come for him. Maybe even for you." But Kalira stood tall. "Dan, let them come. I won't hide anymore." As the days passed, the city outside the palace changed. Varelians gathered in circles, meditating beneath the moonlight, trying to feel what the princess had felt. Some wept when they did. Others fainted. Many simply stared at the stars, unsure of what they were supposed to feel. But one thing was clear. The ripple had touched something old and forgotten. Across the stars, ships moved. Probes were launched. Spies listened. The High Council of the Galactic Concord sent a message to Varelia, demanding to see Elias and Kalira in person. The Varelian elders held emergency meetings. Many feared war. Others saw opportunity. The tension grew like a storm cloud. Inside the palace, Kalira and Elias spent more time alone. She asked him about Earth's oceans, its music, its stories. He told her about his mother, who had been a schoolteacher, and his father, who had died in a mining accident. He showed her a small photo he kept in his pocket. 2 kids smiling, a dog jumping in the background. "My brother and me," he said. Kalira smiled at the image like it was a miracle. "You've lived so much," she whispered. "And yet you still believe in peace." Elias nodded. "I've seen what happens without it." One night, as stars danced beyond the glass roof of her chamber, Kalira reached for his hand. Her voice entered his mind gently. "Do you trust me?" "Always," he said. She closed her eyes, and their minds touched again, but deeper this time. Not just images or emotions, thoughts, memories, understanding. Elias saw her life through her eyes, the lonely halls, the fear in every servant's gaze, the silence that screamed louder than noise. And Kalira saw his 2 battlefields, fire, pain, and still the unbroken thread of hope. When their connection faded, tears clung to her cheeks. "You were never meant to fight," she said. "But you did. And you were never meant to be feared," Elias replied. "But you were." The next morning, everything changed. A small ship arrived at the edge of the system. It didn't send a signal. It didn't ask for permission. Simply entered orbit and hovered. Varelian defense forces tried to scan it. Nothing worked. No tech could read it. It didn't belong to any known species. The Emperor ordered it tracked. Kara, standing beside him, felt a familiar chill. "It's not here to talk," she said. "It's here to observe." Within hours, another ripple moved across space. This one not from her, but toward her. Cold, precise, like a blade against a mind. She winced. Elias stepped closer. "What is it?" "A warning," she whispered. "Kay, they fear what I've become." That night, an agent was caught sneaking through the palace gardens. Not human, not Varelian, No one knew what species he belonged to. He carried no weapons, just a strange device filled with glowing rings. Before he could speak, he bit down on something and collapsed. Unconscious, or worse, the palace went into lockdown. Kalira was escorted to a secure chamber. Elias stayed by her side, though some officials argued he should be taken away for safety reasons. She silenced them with a glance. He stays, or I leave. In the quiet hours that followed, Kalira stared at the stars beyond her window. She knew what was coming. Her power had sent out a signal of peace, but power, even peaceful power, attracts those who seek to control it. Not everyone wanted harmony. Some wanted silence. Others wanted ownership. Elias, sensing her worry, spoke softly. Whatever happens, I'll be here. She nodded. It's not just about us anymore. She was right, 'cause far beyond the system, a council of ancient minds gathered. Minds older than planets, colder than moons. They had felt the ripple, traced it back to Virelia, and they had made a decision. Kalira's gift, now stabilized, was a threat to the balance they had maintained for centuries. A mind that could touch so many at once, without pain, without force, was a tool too dangerous to leave unchecked. In 3 days, they would arrive, not to speak, not to learn, but to end what had begun. Kalira didn't sleep that night. Neither did Elias. They sat in silence, not because they had nothing to say, but because the moment demanded stillness. The ripple had started with a kiss, but now it was pulling the galaxy toward a choice: fear or trust, silence or voice, war or peace. And in the center of it all stood a girl who had never been touched, and a man who dared to touch her, not to claim, not to change, but simply to remind her she was not alone. The stars above Virelia no longer twinkled with distant peace. They watched like cold, silent judges as strange ships approached the system, black as the void, without flag or name. The palace walls, once glowing with soft energy, now trembled beneath the weight of fear. And yet, Kalira stood steady, her eyes calm and sharp. Beside her, Elias Ward moved like a shadow, alert, protective, not because he had to be, but because he chose to. They had become something more than two people, two lives fused by an invisible bond, stronger than walls, stronger than species. And though the world did not yet understand it, that bond had already begun to change everything. Inside the secure council chamber, the Virelian leaders whispered arguments in circles, torn between fear of the unknown and awe of the impossible. Kalira, once the silent princess they had only obeyed from afar, now stood in the center of every voice, not just a symbol of power, but a living message. Control is not strength. Fear is not wisdom. And true connection can rewrite everything. But even as she spoke, her mind reached outward, testing the edge of the stars, and what she sensed chilled her deeper than anything before. The visitors were not curious, not diplomatic. They were united in a single purpose: erase the anomaly. Not Kalira, not Elias, but the ripple, the bond, the idea, left to grow. It would wake minds long kept in chains of silence. And there were those in the galaxy who ruled not by weapons or armies, but by isolation. Kalira knew they wouldn't wait long, and so she made a decision. The council dared not speak. She would leave the palace. She would meet them, not with fleets, not with demands, but with the very power they feared. Elias tried to object, but she placed her hand on his and whispered, not with her voice, but through the soft thread of their bond, "You gave me courage. Let me give it back." They left that same night in a private vessel, old but fast, a relic from her mother's days, before the silence. No guards, no escorts, just the two of them, drawn toward the approaching void like a spark toward shadow. The ship's systems flickered as they neared the edge of the system, not from damage, but from pressure's psychic interference. a force that could not be seen or heard, only felt deep inside the bones of the mind. Kalira closed her eyes, letting her thoughts stretch forward, not attacking, not shielding, but reaching. The space around them thickened, and then, with a shiver, they broke through. The enemy ships hovered like statues, ancient and quiet, pulsing with power so old it felt like memory. A voice nod, a sound, but a presence centered their minds. Turn back. It came from every direction, and none, heavy and final. Aias gripped the console, his jaw tight, but Kalira stepped forward, her hands open, her thoughts steady. We will not. Silence answered, deeper than space. You disturbed the pattern. No, she replied. We restore it. A second presence joined the first colder, older. The ripple must end. She took Ilias's hand again, and the moment they touched, the ripple sparked once more, brighter, bolder. Not a wave of destruction, but of truth. And the truth was simple. Connection does not weaken, it strengthens. The enemy minds pressed harder, trying to crush her thoughts, but Ilias's presence held steady beside hers, anchoring her like a rock against the tide. And then something changed. Kalira's gift, always unstable, always dangerous, did not resist the pressure. It absorbed it. Once chaotic, became clearer with every second. The force against her wasn't destroying her, it was sharpening her. They tried to end her bond, but instead, they revealed its strength. Elias could feel it too, the clarity, the stillness, the unshakable certainty. He whispered her name, not out of fear, but awe. And with that whisper, the ripple grew, not just between them, but outward, touching the ships, touching the watchers behind them, minds that had lived in shadow so long they had forgotten the light. One of the ancient minds cracked, not in pain, but in wonder, like a mirror breaking, to show the truth behind it. A flash of memory burst through the air. Another species, long ago, who had known this feeling. Connection, balance, hope. The pressure dropped. The air shifted. One of the black ships blinked out, vanishing into the stars. A message, not in words but in energy, remained behind. Some of us remember, but not all. The other minds surged again, angrier now, wounded. They didn't want memories. They wanted silence. They began to drain the space around the ship, collapsing reality like a folded page, trying to trap Kalira's mind in an endless loop of fear. But Elias stepped forward, his own thoughts burning bright. Though human, though untrained, his mind had become something new fused with hers. Shaped by the bond, lit by love, not romance alone, but true respect, true belief. He didn't attack. He simply stood, and in standing, he became the first human to resist a psychic invasion by will alone. The ripple exploded, not in violence, but in light. A wave of feeling, of memory, of unity surged across the system. On Varelia, the towers glowed. In orbit, sensors overloaded. Across the stars, ancient minds stirred. The enemy ships began to falter, their silence cracking, their unity breaking. Kalira and Elias floated at the center of it all. Not conquerors, not rebels, but reminders. Reminders that even across species, even through pain, something unbreakable could grow. A bond not written in blood or law, but in trust. The remaining black ship hovered, pulsing with indecision, then sent one last message. If you do this, you will be seen, Kalira replied. We are already seen. And with that, the ship turned and vanished as their own vessel drifted gently back toward the planet. The stars no longer watched like judges. They watched like witnesses. And far below, on the ground, people raised their heads, not in fear, but in wonder. The ripple had not ended. It had just begun. As the small ship descended back toward Varelia, the skies above the capital shimmered with a strange, beautiful glow. A quiet echo of the ripple, that had shaken minds across the stars. And though Kalira and Elias were hailed as symbols of change, peace did not follow them home like a faithful companion. Instead, it stood outside the gates, waiting to be earned. The palace was no longer the same place they had left. Armed guards lined the walkways, not with weapons drawn, but with eyes full of confusion and fear. The emperor stood waiting beneath the crystal arch of the main hall, older than before, his expression unreadable. He had felt the ripple too, not through screens or reports, but deep in his soul, and he could no longer pretend it was just a spark. It was a fire. "What have you done?" he asked Kalira, his voice soft but heavy. She stepped forward without flinching. "I showed them I am not a weapon." "And now?" he asked. "What are you now?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The answer was standing beside her. Elias, silent and strong, no crown on his head, no bloodline behind his name, just a soldier, a human, whose choice had opened a door no one else dared to touch. The council met again in secret, fearing that their authority would crumble under the weight of this new bond. They whispered of removing Kalira from the line of succession, of exiling Elias, of undoing the connection before it spread beyond control. But they were too late. All across Varelia, others had begun to feel the change. Children born with fragile psychic sparks were no longer hidden away. Quiet ones began to speak. In the cold silence that had defined their world for centuries began to thaw. But change invites resistance, and the old power structures, long kept intact by fear and tradition, began to crack, and behind those cracks, enemies crawled forward. It started with a failed assassination. A palace servant was caught in the corridor outside Kalira's chamber, carrying a device designed not to kill, but to erase memory. When questioned, he claimed to hear voices, not from Kalira, but from someone else. Something else. The investigation traced the voice to a hidden, signal-coded transmission bouncing across the system, touching minds who were vulnerable, angry, or scared. The ancient force Kalira had faced beyond the stars had not given up. It had merely changed its shape. No longer attacking from space, it now attacked from within. It planted doubt, distrust, fear-quiet weapons meant to turn the people against their princess before she could truly rise. Cities that once welcomed a ripple now trembled with division. Some called Kalira a prophet, others called her a curse. The humans stationed on Varelia were ordered to pull back to their embassy, but Elias refused. "I wasn't sent here to hide," he told his superiors, his voice steady through the calm. "And I won't start now," the emperor offered him. A shuttle off-rolled, quietly, without judgment. Elias said no. He stayed in the palace, near Kalira, not as a guard, but as an anchor. At night, when sleep was stolen by unrest, they sat beneath the great dome and watched the stars, wondering how something as simple as a shared touch could cause so much chaos. "I thought the ripple would bring peace," Kalira whispered. "It will," Elias replied, "but only after it brings truth. And truth always starts with resistance." A week later, the attacks began. Small at first, power outages, false broadcasts, subtle mind disruptions that made people forget where they were or who they trusted. Then came the larger ones. A central data tower collapsed in the southern district, killing dozens. The signal behind it was traced back to a rebel network calling themselves the Silence Keepers, a group made up of former officials, frightened scholars, and even a few Varelians who had lost control of their psychic gifts and blamed Kalira for giving them hope. Their message was clear. The bond must be broken, or the world would fall. Kalira addressed the people not from a throne, but from the streets. Standing on a platform above the city plaza, her voice carried by ancient towers that once silenced every sound. She told the people the truth, not that she had all the answers, but that she was not afraid to search for them. She spoke not of control, but of connection, not of conquest, but of compassion. Elias stood behind her, not speaking, only watching. His presence alone enough to remind everyone that unity between minds was possible. But the silence keepers were listening too, and they did not wait. That night, as rain fell in soft sheets, the palace shields dropped without warning. A wave of psychic static swept through the halls, disabling the guards. Calira and Elias barely had time to escape into the underground passageways. Attackers weren't there to kill Calira. They wanted to sever her from Elias, believing that if they destroyed the bond, the ripple would stop. But they didn't understand. The bond wasn't just emotional or psychic, it was built on choice, on every moment shared, every hardship faced together. Even separated, it pulsed strong. In the tunnels below the palace, Calira and Elias moved like one being. She led with her mind, sensing every ripple in the air. He guarded with his body, reading every sound. When they finally reached the hidden chamber, the heart vault, where her ancestors once meditated in silence, Calira stopped. "It started here," she said, before the silence. "This is where the old ones touched the stars." Elias nodded. "Then it's where we end this." The attackers followed the trail, confident in their numbers, armed with devices meant to scramble thought and strip emotion. But when they entered the heart vault, they found something they did not expect. Calira and Elias were not afraid. They were connected. Together, their bond created a wave, not a weapon, but a mirror. The silence keepers were forced to see themselves, their fears, their pain, their lies. And in that moment, some fell to their knees, breaking under the weight of what they had become. Others screamed and fled. Only one remained standing, cloaked and silent. Calira stepped forward. "You don't have to be afraid." The figure lowered their hood. It was a woman, older than Calira, with eyes like frozen glass. "You think this will last?" she asked. "You think connection will hold forever?" Calira took Elias's hand. "If we keep choosing it, yes." The woman said nothing more. She turned and walked away, her presence fading like a forgotten dream. The rebellion didn't end that night, but it cracked. The next day, dozens surrendered peacefully. Others simply stopped fighting. The ripple pulsed again, not loudly, not forcefully, but steadily, like a heartbeat, across the planet, and slowly, across the stars. It grew. The heart of resistance had not been broken by power or force, but by understanding. Calira and Elias did not celebrate. They simply sat together, hands intertwined, knowing the true work had only just begun. Above Varelia, the stars shone brighter than ever before. So the galaxy itself leaned closer to witness what was about to unfold, for everything had led to this moment, a battle of ships or a war of weapons, but a quiet, final test of truth. In the eyes of empires now turned toward one bond that had shaken the oldest powers in existence. The bond between a brave human soldier and the last daughter of a forgotten throne. In the days following the Resistance's fall, the silence that once ruled Varelia was no longer feared, for it had become something new, something full of possibility. And though many still watched with doubt, others began to listen, to hope, to imagine a world where connection meant more than control. Calira and Elias worked together every day, not just to rebuild a palace or calm a city, but to form something that had never existed before, an alliance not of treaties or trade, but of shared minds and open hearts, something beyond language, beyond species. And though the high councils of Earth and Varelia held tense meetings filled with questions and warnings, neither Calira nor Elias asked for permission to continue what they had already begun. They simply lived it. Word of their bond spread like fire through the stars, reaching far-flung colonies, hidden civilizations, and ancient watchers who had long believed such a thing could never be. And while some called it dangerous, others called it destiny. But those who fear change never rest for long. And in the shadow of Aurelia's rising light, a final threat waited, silent and patient. Born not from the stars, but from the deep minds that had once tried to erase Calira's gift completely. These Minds Elders who ruled from behind illusions, who bent thought like glass and erased truths with a whisper, had seen the ripple and knew it could no longer be ignored. If Calira and Elias were allowed to continue, if the galaxy accepted their bond as more than chance, then every structure built on fear and separation would begin to fall. And so the elders sent one final message, hidden in the form of a dream, carried by an invisible pulse through Verelia's sky. One choice, one moment, would decide whether the bond survived. That night, as twin moons rose above the crystal towers, Calira stood in the garden where her mother once sang to the stars. And Elias joined her there, both of them drawn by a feeling they could not explain. They spoke little, their thoughts flowing together without words, but both knew something had changed. A storm was building, not of thunder or light, but of pressure, as if the very fabric of space held its breath. Suddenly, the sky above them tore open in a silent flash, and a being stepped forward, not made of flesh, not shaped by time, but glowing like a living shadow. It had no face, only a voice that filled their minds with stillness. "You have made the galaxy remember," it said. "Now it must choose." Calira stood tall. "We already have." The being turned to Elias. "But does he understand what it costs?" Elias stepped forward, his voice clear. "I never cared what it cost. I care what it's worth." The ground beneath them shifted, and in an instant they were no longer in the garden, but in a place between worlds, neither light nor dark, only memory. Around them floated images from both their lives: Elias's first battle, Calira's first lesson, their fears, their losses, the moments that built them. And then the voice returned. "The ripple is not complete until you give it a center, a truth, a promise." Calira understood now. It was not enough to stand side by side, not enough to speak or fight or lead. They had to declare what they were, not for politics, not for power, but for every being watching, waiting, wondering if such a thing could be real. Her hand reached for Elias's, and without hesitation, he met it. In that moment, the ripple surged outward, brighter than any weapon, deeper than any code, but it waited still for one final act, one that could not be forced or faked. A kiss, not for ceremony, not for story, but for truth. Elias looked at her, not like a soldier or a guest in a palace, but like someone who had seen the worst of the universe and still believed in something better. Calira's eyes held stars and sorrow, strength and softness, and in their silent gaze, they knew. The kiss was simple, quiet, but the second their lips met, the galaxy changed. The stars above blinked like new suns, crossed the system's minds, touched minds, and the ripple became a wave not of destruction, but of connection. On forgotten planets, isolated species awoke to a feeling they had never known. On warships hovering in dead space, generals paused with tears in their eyes. On Earth, a child with no voice suddenly laughed, hearing the song of a world beyond. And high in the shadows, the elders watched their grip dissolve, their silence broken not by violence, but by love, real love. Not soft or sweet, but sharp, brave, chosen again and again in the face of fear. The ripple, now complete, carved its place into the stars like a path. And from that day forward, the galaxy was no longer divided by species, language, or past. It was marked by one story, told in every corner, in every heart, the story of Ki, the alien princess no one dared to touch, and the brave human soldier who did. Their bond became more than legend. It became the beginning of a new era, the era of connection, the era of truth, the era born from one kiss that changed everything.